Can please do not just kind of like stand up here and obstruct your visual. Kurt, can you give me my phone and my?
Oh, yeah.
What? Oh, it's not.
All right. So
Oh.
first group modifiers.
Hi.
Okay.
Why did it get bigger?
I don't know. So I'm gonna draw an umbrella, and modifiers basically are describing words. So adjectives, adverbs, and prepositions. I'll continue drawing when Allison explains. And then all of those describing words can be clauses, words, or phrases, just like parallelism. I just explained it,
Okay.
and now you're saying a rhetorical effect.
Hold it. Okay. The rhetorical effect that this can have on words or sentences is that it can enliven, focus, or qualify ideas. So it can bring more, it can change the tone of the sentence and kind of bring forth the idea that the writer is trying to convey with their writing. So I can write down some examples when she's done with this umbrella.
Okay.
Can we change the slide?
I'm almost done.
Can I add a sheet too?
Just press the green button on the top,
That one.
the one that says plus.
All right. There's the umbrella. All right. So, here's a sentence. The frog hopped gracefully from one blooming lily pad to the next.
Okay, so first identify the modifiers to find the describing words. Look at that. So nice.
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay, and hopped is an adjective, adverb, or preposition.
Why are you-
Anyone
Well,
can answer.
Verb.
Okay, gracefully.
Modifying hopped.
Yeah. And then
No
blooming.
show. It's modifying word.
Alright.
Okay, and
So
most
then-
of these are words.
And what would you say the tone of the sentence is?
Cute. Springy.
Oh, that's so nice. All right, now we're gonna do another sentence with very similar structure.
Let's stop for a moment just so everyone understands what's happening here. Adverbs do what, class?
Modify a verb.
Modify verbs. So gracefully is modifying hopped. If we eliminate gracefully from the sentence, what do we lose from the sentence?
How the frog off.
How, and does it become better or worse, the sentence with the addition of the word gracefully? And-
More indentation.
Yeah.
Dramatic color change.
I know, right?
Big deal. Big deal.
dramatic?
Because it's got a lot of modifiers in it.
Not approximately two.
All right, so this has kind of the same structure as the first one, but because we used different modifiers in it, it completely changed the tone of the sentence. So the frog stumbled clumsily from one decaying lily pad to the next. So we got, that's nice. There's a verb. There you go. So then, what would you say the tone is of this sentence compared to the other one?
Depressing.
It is depressing, yes. So
Why did you change hopped to stumbled?
because it has a different effect on the tone of the sentence.
But that's a different verb, not a different modifier.
They're not related.
Oh, no, keep it there because we're going to make a point here in a second.
Okay.
Ms. Wiswell, you're going to be talking to us about what? Concise diction. Is the first sentence an example of concise diction?
Sure, yes.
Well, concise diction pretty much just means there aren't any unnecessary words. Each word is pulling its own weight and
Yes.
provides meaning to the sentence.
Yes,
Right?
if you took out words of that sentence, it would become a
We-
very short sentence.
If you take out gracefully, that's going to lose some significant detail.
Yes.
Okay, now class, understanding what we just talked about when it comes to concise diction. Is there an unnecessary word in the second sentence? What word is that? Why is clumsily unnecessary? Stumbled
Stumbled
implies clumsy. So
Put it back.
in sentence number 2, do we need the modifier clumsily? No,
You just
and no, we would not want to use hopped, because if we use hopped, we're going to use the idea that it was a clumsy type thing. So if we change stumbled to hopped, we would want to keep
The modifier.
the modifier. Because stumbled is such a precise verb, who's doing precise verbs?
Kristen.
Yeah. Because stumbled is such a precise verb, does it require the modifier clumsily? No. So we would say sentence number 2 is an example of an unnecessarily verbose sentence.
Verbose.
Fancy word. Master's degree.
Superfluous vocabulary.
So do you want me to change it now?
No, you don't need to change.
Oh,
I just
okay.
wanted to make that point so we're all on the same page. See how these things fit together.
All right.
Do you have anything else?
No.
So to recap, what is the rhetorical effect of modifiers upon a sentence?
It changes the tone and enlivens it, focuses, and qualifies ideas.
So in the first one, have we enlivened that sentence, focused it, or qualified ideas?
Enlivened.
We've also qualified hopped, right?
Yes.
So, cool. Nice work. Get out of here, crazy kids.
Yeah, do you want me to do anything with the slides or no?
Go back to the original slide that has my list of who's presenting what. Wiswell, you're up next.
Oh no, what did I do?
Press
Or
the
is
X.
this precise diction?
I don't have a master's
No
degree.
master's degree,
I don't
can't
have a
handle the
master's
smartboard. It's not your fault, Strumpy.
Okay.
Hey Pete, press the tag at the top. I mean, it took a little too long to write that stuff down.
I know.
Oh,
I was
this is-
like,
that's
oh, I
perfect.
probably should have made it. Okay.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, please do.
Okay, concise diction. Less is more. Otherwise, why waste time, say a lot of words when few words do trick? You get his point.
Beautiful use of this quote.
Okay, nominalization. Don't do it if you can avoid it.
What is nominalization?
Okay, so nominalization is like this. So we nominalized the decision when we could have just used decided, because she made the decision to have lunch is less precise than she decided to have lunch, because this makes it sound very disconnected.
It's also precise verb choice.
Yes. And show vocabulary. Is it useful or is it useless? Show vocabulary is basically like, you can say a lot of, it's like overusing synonyms. you know? So, do your words contribute to what you're actually trying to say? Between these sentences, which are you going to easily understand better? They're the same sentence, they mean the same thing, but yes, you're going to understand this one a lot better than you're going to understand that one. This happens a lot in academic papers because you want to try to make yourself someone smart. So you'll just like open up a thesaurus and you'll be like, he clandestinely deposited the stationery between the escritoire, which no one's going to understand that. So if you can, just use every man's words. And that is all. So,
Short and simple. Kind
Now,
of like concise
now,
diction.
Chandra,
yes.
does concise diction mean that you only use short, simple sentences?
No, it just means making it so it is understandable and you don't need to read it 3 million times like you would some academic papers to understand it.
To make sense of what a sentence is saying.
Yeah,
Right.
because
So Shakespeare needs to like.
Well, Shakespeare was concise in his time, Eve.
Well, then why did you still
Bad
say about
example.
They don't hate on her. She don't got it.
Well, no, but no, to Eve's point, concise diction nowadays for Shakespeare would be like reading No Fear Shakespeare online, where they translate it from Shakespearean
Yeah.
verse to something that is more easily understood by nowadays folk. Shakespeare, every word that he chooses is pulling its weight and has an effect, but because it sounds like that to us, it would not.
That's
By argument.
it was also a different form of English because
It
it
was
was like
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
it was like the 1500s.
Mhm.
So like
Right.
to them that was just like,
Everyone was using the word.
and also even then he was like lower class when he was writing. So it was
The-
then that would have just been like
The
this.
people who love Trailer Park Boys loved Shakespeare.
Yes.
Everyone
Fun facts. All right. Thank you very much. This was fun. What's next? Who's number 3? Or number 2?
Hey, what's the rhetorical function?
The
Make it
rhetoric.
easier to understand.
Make it. Every word you choose is precise and helps make sense. Eliminate unnecessary or verbose.
Which you want to be most.
This is where you.
Big group. Look at Schottler and his
Oh,
non-masters.
you just wait till
struggles.
number
This is the
second time down a road. Wait, there's like 7 of them.
Oh,
Dawson, what?
remember when I said change the sharing settings?
No, you would not. It's not Dawson.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it is.
No, it ain't. It's go right.
No, go up.
Go.
Click on Anthony's.
Click on
Bro,
shops.
what? Yeah.
It's probably the same thing.
Dude, down.
Second from the bottom.
No masters.
It's probably the same. Yeah.
Why is he so good?
Okay.
It was his slide, not mine. Not it.
Why are you so good at history and then you just get in here?
Bro.
Just do request access.
And then they go.
No, don't, because then I have an email that comes to me,
Oh,
Wait, what are
just
you doing?
have them change the sharing
Yeah,
settings
and just share it.
and save it.
What is their topic?
Short sentences.
I like short sentences
Precise.
and concise diction.
Share.
You're not gonna like mind that.
I can't post it on
That's where I just was. Okay, you try that out.
Hey, is this it?
Good. Go to present. Hurry.
All right.
It's a big slide. Tommy didn't make that.
All right, here we go.
That's copy paste.
All right, we have short, simple sentences and sentence fragments. So for the short, simple sentences, they always convey a complete thought. So the sentence always makes sense and you can understand without other sentences around it. They have to have an independent clause, a subject, and a verb, and they can also add compound verbs, modifiers, objects, or complements. And to use them, usually it's after a bunch of long sentences. There's summaries of what someone's already said, like in essays, and then it's just used as transitions. And the rhetorical effect is 1 or 2 short, simple sentences create emphasis by contrast. So if you put short sentences around the longer sentences, they'll call more attention to them.
Sentence fragments, an incomplete sentence that readers understand to be complete. does not convey a complete thought. It must contain one dependent clause, and it can contain a subject and a verb. It's used to make a transition, to signal conclusion, to emphasize an important point, and to economize expression. And the rhetorical effect is sentence fragments stand out and add emphasis when used intentionally and infrequently.
So long story short, the use of short sentences and sentence fragments around longer sentences creates emphasis.
Yes.
And you want to use short, simple sentences to summarize, transition, make a conclusion, economize expression. What does economize expression mean?
Economize expression.
Mm-hmm.
I'm honestly not really sure.
You want to have a good relationship between your sentences to, I don't know.
The economy.
Yeah.
Make it more efficient.
Yeah, if.
What is an economy car?
Efficient.
You're welcome.
So if an economy car, an economic car is a fuel efficient car, it just gets you from point A to point B. What would be how would one economize expression?
It would make the sentences much more efficient in what they're doing and like
Make it
increasing the
transition.
Science fiction.
Concise diction.
Bam.
Carry on.
All right, so these are some examples of short and simple sentences. Texas Tech lost. Ben is good at soccer, and Ben is smart.
All right, pause. Now, these short, simple sentences are only effective if what?
There is a context to them.
Longer sentences ahead of them.
Longer sentences around. So if we have longer around and then we go to this, that's good. If I have a bunch of sentences in a row that just sound like this, is that good or bad? That's bad.
That's choppy. Like there was a basketball game. Texas Tech.
Oh. Use after many long sentences. So like we said in the first paragraph, first slide, here I'll just read the example. Mr. Lindenberg was gone for a full week after the birth of his second child, and he was dearly missed. He left his students stranded with multiple sections of work to do in the textbook. His students were confused. So as we described in the first slide, with the short and simple sentence at the end, put more emphasis on the fact that we didn't know what the heck we were doing when we were gone.
So that was emphasizing and also summarizing a main point.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Use as a summary of what the writer said. Mason thinks that Kyle Guy missed the last second shot to go to the championship game on purpose, and Kyle's only goal was to draw a foul. Mason does not understand that he was not guaranteed to draw a foul. In order to win, he had to at least try to make it. Mason does not understand basketball.
You would argue all day too.
I would.
Sick.
Beautiful punctuation. Now, these are long sentences. Chandra, is this concise diction?
Yes, every word is plain.
Use as a transition between sentences. Ooh, we didn't bold it.
Yeah, we did not.
All right.
They have to find it.
Riley was, yeah, okay, I'll read it
Riley
off.
spilled paint.
Oh, no, I was going to read it and then I had to do that, but that's okay. Riley was painting the walls in the library and helping Barry like a good friend. Riley spilled the paint. He ruined the carpet and then was removed from the library for the rest of the week.
Oh yeah, he was banned.
Now, so this one, it's like economized expression, right? It's concise diction. If we took out Riley spilled the paint, we wouldn't understand how he ruined the carpet. And that's why you need these short and simple sentences as transition between them. Because it was a great, nice emotion, good friend, and then he ruined the carpet.
Somebody tell me where the punctuation error exists in the sentence.
What did you do, Dawson?
Not complete sentence.
Obviously,
There's too many commas. There's too many. I'll fix it right now.
He ruined the carpet. The comma should be.
And also the
Oh,
time
and-
before.
You need to go to
After
I can't
my
because you don't have that.
No
Who wrote these sentences?
Not me.
First the ringtone and now. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. That's wonderful. Great examples. Who's next?
Me.
I don't know. Who is?
Well, go back. Please go back to my slide and figure it out.
Nope. You missed it on purpose.
Open up
the smart
What?
notebook.
Smart notebook. Okay, so that was
Cumulative
cumulative periodic and inverted sentences. Mesker.
Yeet.
Thank you, Jack.
Are we asking?
No, I think those guys are next.
Yeah, we're
Subordination. And then, which one are you? Yeah, you're at my left. Yeah, you had a real tough one.
Yeah, good, fine. That,
Why we need 7.
Just jumped on it.
there's 7 of them. Don't even jump in.
I can't wait for this presentation.
It's gonna be
No, it
really
would've
good.
been-
It's so good.
Are all of you responsible for saying one word?
Yeah, seriously. He, she, say.
Like, Mesker, why don't you zoom in so you can just scroll up and down?
That's what I said.
All right, here we go.
Oh no.
Okay. So, cumulative, periodic, and inverted sentences. It's 3 different common sentence structures.
Oh.
The kind of the exact opposite of what we just went over. So, a cumulative sentence is where the independent clause comes before the modifiers, before what we add on. So, my example was, it is the ocean that is wild, beautiful, uncontrollable, and never became or understood in completion. So, it is the ocean is the independent verb, and then it adds like a bunch of things to describe the ocean. It's more informal, it's relaxed, and it adds more variety to it. It's stopping it from being bland and boring. Is this gonna work? Oh yay, it works. So periodic is the reverse of that, where the modifiers come first and then the clause comes afterwards. So running through the darkness, breathing in the harsh frozen air, burning with adrenaline and exhaustion, I am having the most wonderful chase. It's emphasis and persuasion if you use it correctly. That is not what I did with this sentence. And it adds suspense. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
What sentence structure do we have that would lend itself to easily constructing a periodic sentence? List in the beginning. What else? Intro phrase. So you start with your intro phrase and then you can launch into what you're trying to say because of that intro phrase.
And then inverted sentences are just making you sound more complex, I guess. Usually in a sentence, the noun comes before the verb. Like, Lindenberg stood in front of a class. He did something. So, the way you do it in this is you do the verb first. So, within the darkness there lived a shadow of a man. Or, standing in front of the class, there was Lindenberg. Nothing. Huh?
It's like turning into the Yoda speak.
Pretty much, but like with more or less concise diction because you use more words. It's for emphasis, it's rhythmic, it's dramatic, and
And how does it emphasize something?
it's emphasizing like what the action is, and you can describe the action kind of.
And as a reader, when you come across a sentence like this, what are you're going to slow down.
You have to slow down to understand the sentence a bit
Now,
more.
how do these sentences work in conjunction with short, simple sentences, Mr. Schottler?
These like the inverted ones?
Any of them?
Oh, any of them?
These are, I mean, you had short, simple. These are long.
Yeah, so you take the long ones, right, and you have, after you like be separating the independent clause, right? It's like, you've got these patterns within sentences, but you could also have them within like a paragraph, where they've got a bunch of like descriptive sentences about a subject, and then at the very end, it's just like got the emphasis on just the subject and a verb. I don't know if that's really correct at all, but.
You made it too complex.
Oh.
Somebody,
It's nice diction, Jack. Come on.
I'm sorry.
somebody simply state how this stuff relates with what we learned about with short, simple sentences.
These would be the long sentences surrounding the short and simple
Yeah,
sentences.
so you pair these or a couple of these with a short, simple. You can emphasize something. Does our short, simple need to happen at the end?
This is first class versus economization.
Yeah. Now, Chandra These sentences seem pretty long. Can this still be concise diction?
My eyes are terrible, so I cannot read them.
Harsh frozen air burning with adrenaline and exhaustion. I'm having the most wonderful
You
cheek.
can't read the whole thing. because it's more- Yeah.
Running through the darkness.
That helps.
Does
I
every,
would say so, yes.
is every class, can you
Yeah.
find a word that's not pulling its weight?
Am I being superfluous in the sentences?
Well, you're great.
See, that was not.
That was
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was giving you an example of what not to do.
Yeah.
I only speak concisely.
Yeah. Are there any unnecessary words in these sentences?
I don't think so.
No, good job, Ms. Metzger. Thank you very much. This is all posted on the internet.
Oh,
Yeah,
never
'cause
mind.
all-
Good.
Everything that you see here is in the class comments.
This
for-
is actually a picture. You guys can save this picture. It's not
You take it in the
typed
background
out.
of your phone. That'd be exciting.
That would be
This.
depressing.
Okay, pronouns.
Oh, sorry. You want me to go back?
Oh, sorry, yeah, subordination.
You can do cumulative sentences with subordination.
Oh, yeah, you can. That's actually would be something I was gonna ask.
I know, and I beat it to it because
But nobody's listening.
I don't like talking.
Subordinates in a complex sentence.
That's what we got.
Okay, we started.
We believe in you.
Okay, subordination is a way to make sentences longer by making one a dependent clause. So one's independent, one's dependent. Subordinating conjunctions are usually at the beginning of the sentence, but there are a few exceptions where it can be in like the middle of the sentence. There are independent and dependent clauses. The dependent clause is created by the subordinating conjunction. And then we have an example. Although you have great power, with it comes great responsibility. So although you have great power becomes dependent on the last part of the sentence.
What type of sentence is that?
It's down here.
What type of sentence structure?
Is it inverted?
No, stuff we learned in the beginning of the year. Intro phrase.
Yeah.
So is every intro
Okay,
phrase
like
sentence an
contrast.
example of subordination?
No.
Why not?
Because not all of them, I don't know. Because not all of them start with a subordinate. I don't know. I didn't,
Look,
this wasn't in the book, Lindbergh.
I don't
Freaking
know
out.
I'm making you think on the feet, man. Got 32 on your ACT according to that short, simple sentence.
Dumb. Stop.
Okay, keep on going.
Speaking of ACT.
Stop.
3, by the way. All right.
No.
So we got 4 types of the relationships. They can either contrast, use cause and effect, based on a condition or based on time. So contrast words would start with like although, well, whereas. Cause and effect is because, since, so that. Condition is if, like once someone does this and this, or time would be when, until, once, and well. So some of them are repeated, but it's all based on the context. Like once and once can be different, like condition or time. So
Every one of those words, if used as the first word in a sentence, would fire up a what?
intro phrase. All right, let's go. That was easy. All right, Mason.
Okay, so we got some punctuation rules. I know not everyone likes it, but
There's a giant space right there.
yeah, I
This is
know.
all yours.
You can use a comma to set off a subordinate clause and separate them, so it's clear where the dependent ends and independent starts, or the other way around. Unless the sentence is very short, then you might not want to put a comma in there, so it doesn't ruin the flow or whatever. Non-essential information to the sentence can be separated with a comma or non-restrictive clause.
What does that mean?
Comma, non-restrictive clause. Oh,
Tyler wrote this part.
Tyler Hansberger popped this in this morning. I wasn't really sure what it meant either, but basically the non-essential information, so non-essential is inessential to the sentence, so you don't need a comma. But if it's essential, you need to bring it into the sentence with a comma. All right, you're back up.
essential information after the independent clause, no comma restrictive clause. Reminder, a dependent clause cannot stand alone. Never leave it with just a period, or it is just a sentence fragment, which has its place. So you can use
We learned
those.
about that earlier.
if you're trying to use subordination.
Mhm.
All right, and then we got our rhetorical strats here. You can blend some awkward sentences into sort of smooth flowing ones and make them easier to understand. So if you have like two independent clauses and they just go together, but they're kind of awkward when you read them separately, just pop a subordinate conjunction in there.
Or if I have a bunch of short, simple sentences in a row, it makes the writing sound robotic. I could do what?
You could make it subordination. Emphasis, usually the independent clause carries a lot of emphasis behind it that makes it your point, like carries more weight with your point. So you can use that to emphasize your point with the independent clause there. And it provides a lot more clarity. Placing the subordinate conjunction at different parts of the sentence can definitely like change your effect a lot to make it easier or harder to understand. You can lose the gain or gain the effect that you're trying to accomplish. So here's an example. Although I was a Badgers fan, I found myself cheering for Texas Tech in the final. And that's versus like, I found myself cheering for Texas Tech in the final, although I was a Badgers fan. Like the contrast isn't quite as like prominent if you have the subordinate conjunction at the end, because then it's like it loses the effect of the contrast. Although I was a Badgers fan, I was cheering for a different team versus having it at the start. That's all we got.
Good job. All right, pronouns.
Go on, let me go over
That's kind of a large group there is.
I don't know.
Like, how do we get that? Can you like send
So
it?
you'll get,
Like the little mail?
something
Yeah.
and then the school gets mailed.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's actually contracting. It's like, is it a
What?
different one from the
I know. I know 2 years ago, you always got mailed. When you couldn't say why you wanted to.
I don't know.
I don't know if that.
Thank you.
All right, let's begin. Maddie hit it.
Did you win?
Yeah. All right.
Hey.
Hey, boys.
Class.
Yeah.
Sexist.
Everyone. Sorry.
Okay, so pronouns.
Yeah.
Pronouns replace nouns in a sentence, and they can make a sentence more clear and like just like clarify who is talking. And so then to do that, there's 3 types of like views.
Yep. Okay, so if you're speaking like first person about yourself, some singular examples are I, me, mine, and my, and plural examples are we, us, our, and ours.
And if you were to speak in second person, which would usually be towards an audience, you would say you, your, yours, and that'd be the same for singular and plural.
And then when there's like, not about yourself or an audience, there's neither, and you can be talking about someone with someone, so it can be he, she, him, her, or if it's not a person, it can be a place or a thing, so it's there, they, and then the plural and singular.
Class, which one of these 3 different types, yourself, audience, or neither, is most common when you're writing an academic paper?
Hey, we're getting there.
Oh,
You could just
Yeah, just
You're
hold
still
on
in
to
our
that,
spot.
sir.
Yeah, seriously. That's just
Hold off. We're
Thank
7 against 1. Okay, so before that, sexist pronoun usage. So when you run into this, you're running into it when you're talking in a third person singular pronoun, and it could be modified to be either a girl or a boy. So there's 3 things that you can do to help fix this. You can use the word or. So like when you're like writing a sentence, you could do him or her, you know, not just the boys. You could also do plural form. You can do like they, them, their, them, you know, themselves. And then lastly, you can alternate between the genders. So you could use like he and her in your writing. Although you have to be careful with this one, because one thing when you're using pronouns is you need to be consistent, because that is key. So just be careful on the third one.
So an example of this would be like most of the time, this is what's like the teacher. So most of the time the teacher tries to tailor writing assignments to interest his students. You'd probably want to change his to like its students or something. So you're not a student.
Or their students.
there's.
There's, yeah.
Teacher is not an it.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so when it comes to you writing, you want to stay consistent, like what Brent said. So now it's time for some class interaction. So when you're writing a paper for class, what kind of pronoun would you use?
Neither. Third, neither.
Unless you're referring to a specific subject. So like if you were talking about an author who's a
If
man,
you were in
you'd say,
Pilates
class,
yeah.
would you use
Yeah, like
I
CIS
and
history
you?
papers. You would use
Fair.
neither.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd use neither.
You do surface.
What about a card to your neighbor?
like,
Two.
Yeah, good job.
Two.
And then a biography. Yeah.
Yeah, way to go.
Yay.
Now, just to clarify, in your example sentence, most of the time the teacher tries to tailor writing assignments to interest his students,
Their
their students. Is it always illegal to use the word his? Is that being sexist?
No, you could always say the name, or you could say their.
Well, if the teacher is a he, is it okay to use
Yeah.
his?
Yeah.
Yes, but if what would make the use of the word his sexist?
If you're not talking about a specific
If it's
teacher.
Yeah, if you're, it's just
You need to
providing
be
a teacher
specific.
example.
Yeah.
So that it's important.
So
to
in the sentence before that, you would write Mr. Lindenberg, and then you could go into his and his.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, nice work, everybody. Your homework for tomorrow, read page 539 to 541. 2-page essay.
what?
I don't know. It's like
Well, 'cause
For
it
your
was so-
homework, Brent, I already.
539.
to 541.
I
Literally a page and a half.
Now you change my I don't like presenting.
I could tell.